I wanted to have a little rant about the collapse of the sexual marketplace, what I'm calling the collapse of sexual polarity, the great inversion. I see men, grown men, literal adult males, calling each other things like man whore, degenerate, pump and dumper. No joke, I saw a young man, granted, but a man, nevertheless, an adult man, call another adult man a pump and dumper. There's something about making it into a noun. It just doesn't sit right with me. These are the sort of things you see on X a lot these days. Young men sitting around like kind of suburban wine moms at a PTA meeting, discussing sexual discourse and kind of slut shaming each other. It's just embarrassing. It's just embarrassing because it speaks to the collapse of polarity, that men have seemingly adopted the tactics of women, shaming, gossip, rally, like schoolgirls. And I understand it to a certain extent because women stopped doing it themselves. Women stopped policing sexuality themselves. So it's not like a random cultural drift. It's like a reaction from men towards women giving up their role. It's what happens when the fundamental architecture of the sexual marketplace, of intrasexual competition, breaks down. Nobody seems to have updated the manual, the user guide. And women have really dropped the ball. Slut shaming, for what it's worth, used to be a very important tool. It used to serve a very important social function. More than moral theatre, it's actually how you practice economic warfare in a sexual marketplace. High-value women have to try and sabotage the efforts of their low-effort rivals. And they do this by making promiscuity socially toxic. It's very, very good for keeping monogamy intact. It regulates the sexual marketplace. It's actually a brutal, effective, and completely logical thing to do for a high-value woman to do from an evolutionary standpoint is to gatekeep sex. Think about it. If you're a woman who is invested heavily in attracting and keeping the best single high-quality mate that you can, your biggest threat is not from other high-value, high-investment women. Your biggest threat is from low-value women, low-effort women who are willing to just give it up for free. So what do? Well, you create big social costs for sexual availability. You make the word slut the worst thing that a woman can be called in the English language. Have you ever noticed that when two women fight each other, verbally of course, the first thing they'll go to is whore, slut, hoe? There's a reason for that. Women have, for the longest time, realized how powerful female sexuality is and controlled it, seeked to control it as a resource. That was the game. And women played the game very, very effectively, ruthlessly, for centuries. And then something unprecedented happened. Women abandoned the strategy. The so-called sexual revolution of the 1960s, that we're told was all about, birth control and career options, was actually women all collectively giving up the ghost. Women all collectively deciding to stop policing each other's sexualities. Slut lost its sting in the 1960s. Female sexual autonomy became acceptable in the 1960s. And by the 2000s, female sexual autonomy is celebrated. The old guardrails that held monogamy and held society by default intact have disappeared overnight. And of course, nature abhors a vacuum. So I understand why some of these low status men have kind of enter the eunuchs, right? They've picked up the sword. It's not just men, right? But it's specifically men who are losing in this new game. Men who are losing under these new rules. You've got extremely disempowered, sexually, socially, psychologically disempowered men screaming degenerate at each other on the internet as if they're not descended from men who literally fought and died in armed hand-to-hand combat. Your ancestors spin in their graves at you typing degenerate on the internet. At another man for getting laid. It's so petty. It's so jealous. Beat on other men, sure, for being potheads. Beat on other men, sure, for being lazy, for being fat, for having ugly girlfriends, for cheating on their wives, sure. But beating on a man for getting laid for his biological imperative just speaks to the darkest inversion possible in our values. And then to top it off, the men who go around saying, degenerate, degenerate, they act like they're upholding some kind of moral code, like they're leading some kind of moral revival. In reality, they're just bitter. Chastity lost, and nobody has invited them to the orgy. It really is like watching eunuchs guard a harem of women, you know? Because what is the traditional insult from man to man? If I bump into you in the street, hey bro, what the fuck? Hey, fuck you, bro, fuck you. What's the first descriptor that gets exchanged? I'm gonna call you a pussy. I'm going to call you a bitch. I'm going to call you a coward. I'm going to call you a cuck. Accusations from man to man that target competence, target honor, not sexuality. Male sexuality doesn't need to be controlled. Male sexuality is actually something that's supposed to be earned, but that's a completely different you aren't even ready for that one yet. But men are throwing whore around like it means something. As if they have some sort of sense of moral clarity, when really this isn't all just one big psychosexual cope. Wrong weapon, wrong war, buddy. What you've got is low-status men trying to reimpose sexual scarcity artificially because they can't compete in what is an abundant sexual marketplace, if you're Chad. What a lot of these guys are trying to do is that they're attempting to recreate conditions from fucking medieval times under which they may have stood a chance. Where is my state-mandated GF? It's strategic. It's a mating strategy, sure, but it's pathetic, is what it is. And it reveals a fundamental misunderstanding of their own nature. Right at the center of this week on X sits Aella, I'm pretty sure that's how you pronounce it, Aella. Famous internet whore. Seems to shock everybody for the wrong reasons. Seems to be a really polarizing character online. TBH, I think there are far worse whores in the world than Aella. But alas, yeah, what she's doing is obviously wrong and morally degenerate. See, she triggers people, not necessarily because she's shocking, but because she's obvious. She's actually archetypal. She's the whore in full view, in broad daylight. Out for the public to just throw tomatoes at. She's what happens when you take whore and you turn it into a brand. When you take a prostitute and you give her a Substack and a research grant. It's fascinating watching. Well, and I think she annoys men the most because unlike the OF girls that you have to kind of go out in search of, Aella is in your hug box. She's in your safe space. She understands your memes. She speaks your language. Must be very annoying. Must be very, very annoying if you're a sexually frustrated man on Twitter to have Aella right there shoving her kind of devalued tits in your face. It must be brutal. Because she's not just selling sex, she's selling introspection. She's a whore who makes you think, and that's terrifying, right? Like, that's fucking... Whores are not supposed to speak. Whores are not supposed to be self-aware, right? Of course, that's not necessarily true. If you look at antiquity and you look at the role that the prostitute plays, it is archetypal, right? You have courtesans. You have, I think they're the Hecatai, is that what they're called? The kind of, in ancient Greece. I digress. Aella is in your face, is the point I'm making. She's on your timeline. She's in your algorithm. She's weaponized transparency, and that pisses people off because it breaks their brains. But in reality, we should really be thinking about this and thinking about what it means. Why we're all so triggered by this whore. if you look at how hypersexualization has changed the role of the whore archetype, it's actually fascinating. There are no real prostitutes anymore in the traditional sense. At least you would have to go quite far, I believe, and quite out of your way in order to find them. There are no courtesans anymore. Street walking red light hookers or elite level companions for Russian mafioso billionaires. Neither of these things really exist en masse anymore. Girls are in their bedrooms. They're selling pussy pics for $9.99 to 1,000 strangers, like through a phone screen. What is the need? They don't even have to make eye contact, right? There's literally no danger. But you know what else there isn't? There's no Eros. So in reality, you can make an argument these women aren't even whores at all. We've commodified the whore, just like we've commodified everything else. It's funny, I didn't think you could do that. I thought if one thing was free from commodification, purely by virtue of the fact that it's basically a transactional commodification anyway, I thought it would be prostitution, but apparently not. Apparently not. Back in the day, I know it's hard to believe, but back in the day, back in antiquity, the whore is actually this kind of transcendental, liminal figure on the borderline between civilized and barbarian, on the edges of society, who actually plays a pivotal role in society. Somebody has to fuck the bored, lonely old men. Somebody has to take out the trash, right? But it's better if it happens at 6 o'clock in the morning while everyone else is asleep. It's better if we don't talk about it. It's an important, it's a vital social function, but let's not fucking glorify it, right? Let's not go around, at the same time, let's not go around and oppress it, because that doesn't tend to work out too well either. That, I don't know, that's what Muslims do. That's what happened in the Salem witch trials. By the way, the Salem witch trials had very little to do with like men hunting down evil magical witches, and a lot to do with what I'm talking about, female intrasexual competition, right? Women being like, that woman's selling it, and that woman's selling it for cheap. Let's get her, burn the witch. Female religious hysteria drove the Salem witch trials, and nobody fucking talks about it. Weird. But here is what everyone's missing, and here's my key takeaway from this whole fucking rant, right? It's the whore must exist. I'm not going to go as far as to say the sacred whore and sell you on that, but there really is something to that. There really is something to the temple priestess who gives out favors. The whore is imperative. It's kind of encoded into human psychology. And if it doesn't exist in the shadow, it will evidently exist in the light. Taking these women who should be hidden and making them celebrities, taking regular women and making them whores, is obviously catastrophic for society. But all I'm saying is that men can't gatekeep it. Men shouldn't gatekeep it. Heterari. That's what they were called in ancient Greece. The heterari, the educated, sophisticated women in society. Philosophers, artists, conversationalists even. There's an argument that Catherine the Great of Russia was a whore. There's a time and a place for whores. There really is a time and a place for whores. Based? Not a very base take, huh? Right, burn the witch. Burn the witch would be a better, more base take. But being a whore is not actually about sex. It's about accessing something that conventional society cannot provide. It is a bridge between the sacred and the profane, and it used to be institutionalized. Look at Japan. You can say what you want about their birth rate, but they have a very implicit understanding of this and of the role of the whore in their culture. Something that we seem to have lost. I don't think it's a coincidence that we lost it, along with the rise of feminism, along with the emasculation of men and the demoralization of men en masse. There's something about Christian morality and Victorian morality that the sacred whore just became a whore. And now that we've lost Christian morality, we have celebrity whores. It's just fucking insane. You know, people say, I say this all the time, it makes people so angry. When it comes to OF and when it comes to sexual immorality, men are more to blame than women. Men have to take responsibility on themselves more than women do. But men cannot go around trying to gatekeep sex. In my opinion, there's something really upside down and really unnatural about that. I'm lucky I'm old. I'm lucky I mean, not in real world terms, but in internet terms, I'm fucking ancient. I'm like early 30s. I'm an old man. I'm glad that a lot of this stuff doesn't really apply to me anymore. I'm not sure I could survive as a young man in my 20s in this extremely cutthroat sexual marketplace. But I know for sure there's one thing I wouldn't be doing. And that's looking at other men and being like, man, whore. Fuck, man.